Hello there everybody, Ben Cola here, the Zen of Ben. Today is March the 30th, 2015, and over the weekend I've been watching the articles on the internet, not on the mainstream news of course, but on say YouTube and some of the internet websites devoted to the Fukushima disaster, which happened in March of 2011. As you may recall, in Japan there was a gigantic tsunami similar to the one that happened in Bali, and a gigantic wall of water came into Japan and went inland for miles. But along the coastline there was a large nuclear power plant, and the nuclear power plant has 6 reactors, I believe, and of those 6 reactors, 4 of them were damaged very badly. I think one might have been offline at the time, and one I believe is still working. But in any case, the 4 that were damaged represent a tremendous problem for the Pacific Ocean, and in fact, unfortunately, what most people don't know, because if you've only been watching the mainstream news, you haven't really been told, but other than that there was a nuclear accident and an explosion. But the since March 11th, the Fukushima reactors have been leaking radioactivity, including every kind of horrible radionuclei that you can imagine, into the Pacific Ocean, because the cores of the reactors melted down. You see, when the tsunami came inland and hit the building, it wiped out the electricity and it wiped out the ability for the pumps to work. So therefore the uranium, the fuel, in some cases it was MOX fuel, and there were different types of fuel in the different reactors. It just happened to be that they were not all the same in this particular instance. I suppose they were experimenting or trying to build an atomic bomb or something like that. But in any case, they had stored fuel, which was used up fuel that was in swimming pools, which is how the United States and everywhere around the world essentially stores their nuclear spent fuel. And so it has to be kept in water, otherwise it'll overheat. And if it overheats, then it'll catch fire. If it catches fire, it'll make smoke, radioactive smoke, and probably cause an explosion, and that would spread nuclear contamination for thousands of miles, and it could circle around the Earth. Now, as you recall, there was an explosion, more than one explosion, when this whole thing happened, because there was a hydrogen leak and there was oxygen in the building, and the building exploded. So that blew the roof off, and the building collapsed, and radioactive fuel rods went all over the place, and the core, the radioactive core, what the part of the reactor that actually has the active fuel in it, melted down, and that went down. And if you have seen that movie, The China Syndrome, where the reactor melts down, and it goes down, as there's a containment building. All reactors have a containment building in case something like this happens. But once that metal of the uranium melts down and gets so hot, it's hotter than the sun, it will eventually pierce its way through any kind of containment. There's nothing that can contain it. So what happened was the lump of fuel, which is, I believe, 150 tons in each reactor, is just a molten lump of liquid radioactive metal of various kinds of radioactive metals, like uranium, plutonium, MOX fuel, and they are basically are in critical mode. So in other words, they're out of control nuclear reactions where they're not exploding, but they're melted down, and you've got a liquid ball of molten metal that's glowing, probably brighter than the sun, and it's down through the core of the buildings, in each one of those buildings, and it cracked the floor of the building, which was built to supposed to contain it, at least for a short while, and it went down, and now it's in the earth. Now, now that would be bad enough if that was all that happened. But in this particular case, the electrical station there, the Fukushima Daiichi electrical station, is right on the Pacific Ocean. And as you know, Japan is an island, and unfortunately, it is upstream, which means that anything that comes out of there is going to float across the Pacific Ocean in the natural currents of the Pacific Ocean. And unfortunately, the current from Japan goes pretty much straight to the United States and the western United States coast of California and west coast of Canada. So we now are in a predicament here where we have radioactive seawater that has already reached, and I'm sure many of you know already, and only a few of you, I think, who watch only the mainstream news don't know, but anyone who is watching these internet channels and the experts that are willing to talk about it, because it's just such a terrible situation, the mainstream news doesn't even want to talk about it. And the government of the United States isn't talking about it either, which is really bad, because a lot of people are sick now that could have been saved, because when the initial blast happened, a lot of that radioactivity was ejected high into the atmosphere and blew over to the United States. And we could have all been told to stay inside, avoid going out in the rain. We could have taken potassium iodide pills to protect our thyroid, which I didn't do, and now my thyroid is damaged. For the rest of my life I have to take a pill every day, along with most of my family also has to take a pill every day. So we all got hit. But in any case, right now, no one can get close enough to this molten mass to figure out a way of stopping it. So basically, you've got a molten, what they call a corium, which is a nuclear reaction hot enough to melt the metal that is the fuel, and it's down in the ground, and it went down far enough into the ground, right on the beach, literally on the beach, that you've got a water table there that's fairly high, and this molten metal that's hotter than the sun is hitting the water and creating steam, and the steam is flying up in the air and also going airborne. So you've got the steam floating across the Pacific Ocean, and unfortunately the jet stream prevails also, just like the water does, and it goes from Japan straight to us. As a matter of fact, back in World War II, the Japanese used to launch balloons with bombs on them underneath, and the balloon would float across all the way across the Pacific Ocean, and it would explode in the United States. They were so confident it would hit the United States that they spent a lot of money on these balloons, and they did in fact make it to the United States, and I believe even killed people here who tried to defuse them or stop them when they landed, and so forth and so on. So that's how sure they were that the balloon was going to float straight over here. So everyone is well aware that the exhaust, the pollutants from this thing are blowing from Japan straight to the United States, as well as drifting in the ocean, which takes way, way longer, but it will eventually land in the United States. And it has arrived. It is here. And because it hasn't been shut off over there yet, even if they were to manage to shut it off today, which seems highly unlikely because they're talking about taking 40 years to shut this thing off, you still have the other 40 years worth of pollutants, radionuclides coming across the Pacific Ocean. And I'm just giving you beginner speech here. I could go into greater depth, but for the purposes of getting through this thing. Now, these toxins are so horrible that they don't just go away. They last so long that they're going to outlast all of our lives. So for argument's sake, these poisons that are going into the water are going to last longer than we're all going to live by many, many times. So that for the matters of this discussion, those poisons in the water, those toxins, those radionuclides, are never going to go away. They're going to be here forever. They have to be shut off. And there's so much of it over there that's down in the ground, which they don't even know exactly where it is because they can't get close enough to it. Anyone who gets close enough to it dies almost instantly. So something has to be done. There needs to be a global effort. Now, if I were in charge, I would say what I would do would be I would have every nation in the world. I would say, look, we're going to have a one-time allowance for this particular situation because it's a matter of life or death for the entire Earth. See, because if the Pacific Ocean gets a big enough dose of this, it's already proving to have received a large enough dose, it's killing off the sea lions, it's killing off the fish that live in the Pacific Ocean, and now they're all too radioactive to eat because if you were to eat it, if it didn't cause cancer in your body, it could do other things. And if you did eat it and it didn't cause cancer the first time, and you ate it again, then your chances of getting cancer from it go up. And so you really can't eat the fish with any great confidence. And the government seems to be talking about the ocean becoming acidic. They want to put more rules and regulations in saying that the world is heating up. Well, what's happening? They're not telling you the truth here. On one hand, they're saying that the ocean is in trouble, the world is in trouble, but they're not telling you what the trouble really is. And moreover, the worst part about it is they're not trying to address fixing it. They're allowing Japan to go it alone. And just like the Chernobyl meltdown, which happened back in the 80s, I think, a wide area of Europe was contaminated, and to this day, if you have a Geiger counter and you walk around, you can measure large amounts of radioactivity still in the ground. It's in the plants and the vegetables, and even the Ukraine, a part of the country just south of Russia that used to be a part of the Soviet Union, got a big dose of the Chernobyl radiation. So, I mean, they're actually have a war going over there now, and they're fighting over a piece of radioactive real estate. So I can understand the anger that some people that are still living there, and they feel that after everything they went through, they should be allowed to stay there. And in most of it, I guess it's still habitable, but your life expectancy is much less. The average life expectancy of a Russian male, I think, is age 57. Now I'm 60, and I plan on living a lot longer. Other than my thyroid, my doctor is telling me that I'm in good enough health that I should be able to live as long as I want, unless I should somehow come upon an accident or something. But there's really nothing wrong with my body that is life-threatening, provided that I take my hormone replacement for the thyroid. But that shouldn't have happened, because the government should have warned us that that radioactive cloud was coming, and it should have warned us to stay out of the rain. And at the time that cloud came, I was rained on several times, and most likely weakened my thyroid, and it finally last year went out all the way, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And as I already told you the story, so I'm not going to go through it again, but bottom line is, when the ambulance came, took me to the hospital, they thought I was having a heart attack, and then they found out very quickly there wasn't anything wrong with my heart. It was actually my thyroid making it look like I was having a heart attack. And the only thing that could cause the thyroid problem that I have is radioactive iodine. And that could only come from a reactor, so it would have had to have been Fukushima or the local radiation station up the road from where I live. So assuming that there's nothing wrong with this up the road, which you would have heard about it, I think, but I don't know the way things are going now. I'm starting to wonder why. But if you look on the internet and do a search, you'll find that many of the Geiger counters that the EPA manages and NOAA were not working, or were switched off, or were down for repairs, or out to be recalibrated at the time that the cloud was coming. It seems awful curious that our government as large as of a military as it has, and especially being a nuclear power, a nuclear armed nation, that we wouldn't have Geiger counters, especially given the fact that we have 100 nuclear power stations, that there should be Geiger counters set up by our government and monitored all the time. But we really don't have the number of Geiger counters that we're supposed to, and the ones that were supposed to be working just weren't working at that time, or they were switched off for political reasons so that they could say they didn't know what the limits were, because we all really should have evacuated. Now that's really an impossibility, so they probably figured, no, there's no way we can evacuate everybody, so let's just keep it quiet and not tell anyone, because there's nothing they could do about it. But there is something they could do about it. They could have given everybody potassium iodine pills for a while and told everybody to stay out of the rain, and that would have prevented many thyroid problems. So to make a long story short, I have some ideas. The Japanese people are very smart too, and they came up with some ideas. And what they have been doing is they drilled holes, wells, between the ocean and between where they think these melted corium cores are, the cores of the nuclear reactors. And so when the rainwater that's coming off the mountains, which are located behind the radioactive plant, as the rainwater, the natural rainwater, runs off the mountains and through the earth as aquifer water. It runs underneath. It passes by the corium and it picks up these radionuclides, and it carries that into the Pacific Ocean. So what they did was they drilled a lot of boreholes and turned them into wells and pumped the water out of the ground, so that any water that's in the ground that gets near these cores would either A, be prevented from getting to the cores, because the wells were there to drain the groundwater down to a point where it would be much less groundwater passing by the cores, and thus less groundwater coming in contact with the core, and then in turn later running into the ocean to pollute the ocean. And then they were running it through big filters that the United States sold, and maybe the Japanese built too, but I believe the United States built some of the filters. So they're basically trying to catch the water in the ground and filter it, and then if it's polluted, they're storing it in these big tanks, and they have hundreds of these great big giant tanks, the kind of tanks that would normally hold oil at, say, a refinery. So if you ever drove your car past a refinery and you see these great big metal tanks that are like 3 stories high and about almost a football field across, I mean, that's what they have. They have hundreds of these things, if not thousands, and they're all filled up, and they filter the water in these tanks, and I guess after they filter it to a certain extent and they feel comfortable with it, I guess they release it into the Pacific Ocean. So they either need to build more tanks because they don't have enough tanks and they don't have enough land, so they're going to need to get more land so they can build more of these tanks, which I think is sort of preposterous, because this metal, these metals, the radionuclides, are going to stay radioactive for longer than we're going to live. So how much land would you need? I mean, you'd need more land than they could possibly get, even if they seized everybody's land within miles of the plant, you would still have this problem. So I think that they had proposed building an ice wall where they were going to drill boreholes in the ground. They were going to put pipes down to a depth of about 90 feet and pump Freon down in there, or liquid ammonia at minus 200 degrees or something, and freeze the groundwater, so to effectively make an ice wall. And I believe that's what they're still working on right now, but they're running into all kinds of problems and so forth. Now I propose that because Japan cannot bear all the costs and there's not enough manpower to do this, I think that what we should do is we should have the entire world contribute maybe a couple of thousand men from each army of every major country, or even every country should contribute some manpower to this effort, and they should build a gigantic wall, like a wall of China, around this thing, but maybe move the wall back, because right now you can't get close enough to this thing because it's too dangerous. So I would say instead of trying to fight the danger, I would say you can move faster by having more men and by backing up to maybe a mile away and then build a wall that goes down to where it hits rock, say down to 90 feet, a concrete wall, and then you build this giant wall that's maybe a mile away in a radius of a mile all the way around the plant. And then what you do is you let the water build up inside that 1 mile ditch there, and even though it's in the ocean, and you just don't let it pass between the circle that the plant is in and the actual ocean itself. So in other words, that water would be highly radioactive, and you could put a cover over to some kind, maybe some sort of a rubber coat cover that's also got maybe a half of an inch of lead on top, and you just have to let it sit there until this thing cools off. Now eventually it's going to cool off by a simple fact that it's sitting in, even though it's underground, it's sitting in, the metal is sitting in a wet environment, and it's going to eventually run out of enough being radioactive enough that it stays molten, and it's going to turn into a solid. And once it turns into a solid, then it'll be a lot more stable, and you can continue to maintain the wall. And if the water inside the 1 mile radius wall gets too hot, what you could do is pump the water out, and in a long loop around Japan, and essentially like a radiator, you could run it around and then pump it back in as cooler water. So you might be heating the environment up a little bit, but you're preventing the radionuclides from getting into the ocean and thereby being directly in contact with the marine life. Because right now it's killing the plankton, and anything that eats the plankton then becomes poisoned, and so then the bigger fish eat the smaller fish, and then they become poisoned, and that's called bioaccumulation. So as the poison goes up the food chain, it eventually kills the larger fish and contaminates into the tuna fish, which people like to eat tuna fish, and so they're toxic right now. If you eat a tuna fish, you're putting yourself at great risk. So the other thing is that the United States of America, when this happened, said Hillary Clinton, in her infinite wisdom, personally I think it was an insane decision, said that we will not stop importing food from Japan. So frankly, the United States government, it almost seems like they're trying to kill people, because the United States of America, they raised the allowable limit of radionuclides in food to be 10 or 12 times that allowable in Japan. So if they were to catch a fish in Japan, and the fish were to measure, let's say 150 becquerels, which is a measurement of radioactivity per kilogram of meat of food, that would not be legal in Fukushima or Japan, anywhere to sell it. But they can ship it to the United States and sell it, because the United States, I believe, allows now under the new Hillary Clinton plan 1,200 or more, 1,250 I think it is, becquerels per kilogram. So this is horrible. If you were to eat seafood that's polluted to that extent, it would only take a few servings to make you sick, and perhaps that would be enough to kill you. Now, you might not develop cancer for a year or two or even 10 years, but it would be definitely a death sentence if you ate that tuna fish that was polluted to that extent several times. You would definitely die of it, maybe not right away, but within a certain number of years, it's a certain death sentence. So I know of no remedial cure for that. Some people are saying that ginger and curac or whatever, there are some herbs they say that are good, but they're still these radionuclides. If you ingest them and they get into your body, and then they become part of your body, but by virtue of the fact that they go into your muscle and then they become part of the muscle of the body, like cesium-137, which is attracted to muscle. And what is the main muscle in your body that matters the most would be the heart. That's why so many of your friends are dying of heart attacks. You know, if you think about how many of your friends or people that you know over the last several years have died of a heart attack. Well, that's because the cesium is getting into their body from the food they're eating, fish they're eating, and going into their heart, because their heart is a muscle, and it's causing disruptions in the rhythm of the heart and putting it at a great strain. So what does this all mean? Basically, the water in the Pacific Ocean is going to eventually circulate throughout the entire Earth. Now, for the most part, it's going to stay in the northern hemisphere and go round and round and round, and very little is going to get into the southern hemisphere. That is south of the equator. You're going to have less pollution. But it will eventually, over the years, mix. And because it lasts forever, there really is, even though we would dilute a little bit, you have to remember that over the next 40 years, as this wall is being built, which I'm hoping that if we get the whole world involved, maybe we can build this wall in 3 to 5 years to wall this off. And I still would believe that there's going to be quite a bit of leakage, but not flowing. Right now, you've got nothing hampering the flow of these radionuclides into the ocean. Even if this wall just slows it down 90%, so we only have 10% leakage, that would be much better, because then that would, whatever does leak out would be diluted by the gigantic size of the Pacific Ocean, and it would still be horrible, it would still be deadly. Many people are going to die anyway, but it would be a lot safer. Moreover, you have, because this corium, the melted core of the reactor, is so hot that it's hotter than the sun, as it's down in that water, in the water table down below the surface of the Earth, as the water from the passing by aquifer and the fact that it's near the ocean and it's got a saltwater aquifer hitting it and a freshwater aquifer hitting it from the mountains, whether it's fresh or salt, either way, the water is hitting it and it's boiling that water. Even though it's underground, it's boiling, creating steam, and that steam is rising through cracks in the ground. And so we have now that steam's coming up and is going airborne and flying across the ocean. And that's why you're hearing about a lot of airline stewardesses and the pilots and the airline workers, the pilots and the stewardess flight attendants, are getting sick, and their hair is falling out. And you have to go look around the internet, but you'll be able to find articles. This is real, folks, and if we don't do something to, at the very least, try to stop this thing, and try as hard as we can, because we're fighting for the Earth. If this thing is allowed to keep going, it will eventually kill off a large percentage of everybody on the Earth, because it's so toxic, and because it's going to be leaking for so long, and because these chemicals never wear out, at least not in our lifetime. They're going to be just as toxic when we die as they are now. Not all of them, but many of them are going to be just as toxic when we die as they are now. Some of them wear out in a matter of a week or a month or two. They wear out considerably, but they're not anywhere near as dangerous as the long-term ones, like the uranium and the plutonium and the MOX fuel and americium. I mean, there are hundreds of these chemicals that are man-made. They do not exist in the natural Earth. So when you hear a scientist, try to downplay the incident by saying, well, a banana is radioactive, and it's not the same kind of radioactivity, folks. You need to do your homework. Go on the internet. You need to listen to some experts who are not being swayed or paid off by the government, or have a job working for the government where they're paid to just keep you calm because they know there's not a lot they can do about it. Well, I disagree. I believe that with the effort that we're putting into generating wars, we need to all come together as a united Earth, and we need to all contribute 1,000 or a couple of thousand workers. Each country needs to put a couple thousand workers in this thing, and we need to build a huge wall around this thing. My best advice would be to not try to build a wall real close to it, because you can't get close to it right now, it's too dangerous. But build a wall farther back, and even though it would take, the wall would be bigger, if you build it further back, you'd have less people getting sick while they're building it because they'd be farther away from it. And then eventually, you with the wall further back, you could build the project faster because you wouldn't have people getting as sick. And with more people working on the project and people not getting quite as sick as if they were trying to be right there in front of this thing, trying to build some sort of a barrier, you could move faster. And I think that we should allow the banks of the world to do quantitative easing, to provide money for this thing, even if they have to use a printing press. And it doesn't matter. In this particular case, we're fighting for the world. We're all going to be sickened by this thing at the very least, if not outright killed by this thing over a period of time. Might not be, you might not get sick from it tomorrow. I already have been affected by it, and so has my family. But you will eventually, at the very least, get sick from this thing. And worst case scenario, of course, you're going to die from it. Now, if you look at the news, you'll see that a lot of sea lions are dying off the California coast. Well, they're dying because there's nothing to eat. The fish have already died. The small fish that they eat died because the smaller crustaceans that they eat have already died off, because the foods that smaller fish eat, like the clams and the mussels, they breathe in water and they filter the plankton out, and that's what they live on, and then they exhale the water. So instead of breathing in air and exhaling air, they're breathing in water and exhaling water. So they're acting as a water filter. And as they filter the water, every so many breaths that the mussel or the clam or the oyster takes, they're going to get a particle, a hot particle from one of these man-made isotopes stuck in them, and that's going to be causing radiation in the small area around the particle, and it eventually kills the clam or the oyster or the crustacean or the plankton, and it's killing them off. And then, of course, the whales don't have plankton to feed on, and the fish don't have crustaceans to feed on, and therefore there are no fish in the water for the fishermen to catch or for the sea lions to eat. And so you see this whole situation is you have an eco collapse where all the sea life is going to die, and furthermore, we eat the sea life too. For example, the tuna fish. So eventually, it's going to be harming the humans. Already is. If you look at the sales of the medicines that people need to take to correct defective thyroids or thyroids that aren't working properly, you'll see that it's off the chart how much of this kind of medicine that is being sold now because it's doctor ordered based on blood tests. So that's how serious this is, and it's getting worse every single day. It's getting worse, and because of the nature of these chemicals, these man-made elements that are horrible, horrendous, and they're used in it to make atomic bombs. And you've heard about the horrors of an atomic bomb, and it's not just the blast that gets you, it's what they call the fallout. And the fallout are radioactive particles that come down where the dust is kicked up by the bomb, and it binds with these radionuclides, and it falls down, and you breathe it in. And that's the real bad thing. Yeah, being exposed to it is one thing. That would be like having a chest x-ray, and the gamma rays go through you, and then they expose on a photographic plate. And that's not good for you, because these rays, as they go through you, they damage your DNA. But if you should, getting x-rayed is one thing, and if that's all this was, that would be one thing. But right now, you've got these particles that are loose in the environment, so they're not just x-raying you, you're actually eating them. So imagine eating an x-ray machine, and now you've got the chemicals that make the x-rays stuck inside you. So it's x-raying you all the time. There's no shutter. Like, they take a picture of you, the shutter opens, the shutter closes, and then the nurse walks back out and says, okay, you're all done. You're not being x-rayed anymore. But if you breathe in one of these particles from the air, it's stuck inside you, and you're being x-rayed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from the inside out. So it's like being X-rayed forever and never, the X-rays don't stop until you die. So it's horrible, and no one's talking about it because it's so dangerous. They don't want to frighten you to death, but you're going to die anyway if it isn't stopped. And this is way more than the Japanese can tolerate. They don't have enough manpower to handle this, and they don't have enough money to handle this. But the main thing is, even if they had the money, they still don't have enough manpower to have a project going that size. So the rest of the world needs to step up and do something, because it is affecting everybody all around the earth, especially the United States. I mean, this crap is blowing straight to the United States. So we should be over there fighting that thing just as hard as we're fighting anybody else around the world. And I think we need to focus on this, because it's going to affect every American, whether they're a soldier or a civilian or just a small child. Which is the other thing. These poisons, these radionuclides, and the fallout affects children to a far greater extent than an adult. And the reason is, when the child gets hit by this, they're growing, and as they grow, their cells are dividing. And when the cells are dividing, the DNA of one cell has got to transfer that DNA information to the next cell so that it can reproduce the way it's supposed to. But these toxins, these radionuclides, when you get X-rayed, to the extent that you're going to be exposed to ionizing radiation, it damages the DNA. So if you're a child and you're growing, your cells are dividing more, and so every time your cell divides, there's a chance that something's going to go wrong in the DNA because it got hit by one of these particles. Where if you're an adult, you're not growing anymore, your cells are just replenishing what's already dying. So the number of cells reproducing in an adult is much less. Plus you're bigger, and so you've got more layers of fat to protect you from incoming rays that hit your body. Some of them might not make it through the skin, but a small child or an infant, if you're an unborn child, you're getting the blood supply straight through the placenta. So if the mother breathes in airborne particles, then they could technically get inside the bloodstream of the mother and go right into the baby, and the baby will have a miscarriage or be born with terrible defects such as maybe brain damage to where they or IQ is so low they're retarded and they can't learn anything, or they may be born without eyes or can't see properly, or they may have more than one leg or more than two legs, or not have any legs at all, or might have twins like Siamese twins. Anything can happen. Once the DNA is damaged, then as the baby is growing inside the mother's womb, any kind of horrific outcome could happen. And so that's why you're hearing about these birth rate is down, and that the miscarriage rates are up, and that a lot of children are being born with serious defects because of this Fukushima thing. But because the government is allowed now to lie, it's written into the law, and they're allowed to propagandize, they can lie by omission. They can simply not tell you what's happening. So they're lying by omission because they don't want to frighten anybody or make anybody nervous, or they think the economy will go down if everybody gets nervous and hunkers down and doesn't go anywhere, or doesn't afraid to go outside. But that doesn't have to happen either. You just need to take some precautions, and if the government would simply help. But they're not even screening the food. They made an announcement the other day when questioned the EPA. They said, are you checking our food supply to make sure that even though the food supply is allowed to have 10 times more radiation than in Japan, are they checking it to make sure that it isn't 20 times more than Japan? And the answer was no, they're not checking the food supply. So even though we're allowed to be poisoned to the extent 10 times more than the Japanese are, nobody's checking to see if in fact we are or we're not being poisoned to an even greater extent than that. But the ace up the sleeve of the power company that released all of this stuff, well, it was a natural disaster. If you believe that there was a natural disaster, there are weapons that can make a tsunami wave like the wave you saw. There are weapons that are nuclear weapons that can be detonated in the ocean and make a wave. So it is theoretically possible, if you're a conspiracy theorist, to believe that maybe another nation that maybe doesn't like Japan may have done this on purpose, or maybe the New World Order, or some, if you believe in that kind of baloney, the possibility it was done on purpose, because oddly enough, they were refueling one of the reactors at the time this happened. So the fuel was just delivered. It was on the roof of the building, and the old fuel was being transferred out. So it just, the tsunami wave hit at the worst time, and the fuel that they were putting in was the kind of fuel that they used to make bombs out of. So it was highly enriched to the point that it was 100 times more dangerous than the ordinary fuel that they would have used. So it's very, very interesting that the tsunami hit at that moment when the plant was the most vulnerable. And there are other things that make me very, very suspicious about this whole thing too. For example, the reason that even though the tsunami hit, if they could have kept the cores of the reactors cool, even though the water flooded in, they could have kept those reactor cores cool if they could have kept the pumps running. But they were saying they couldn't get batteries because they could have run the pumps with batteries. But they were saying, well, all they could get were 2-volt batteries, but they needed 12-volt batteries. Well, anybody who knows anything about electricity, and I'm not an electrician, but like I told you, I learned enough from my father that I'm a pretty good DC engineer. And you're talking about men who are running a nuclear power plant. They should be way smarter than me. The Army delivered them 2-volt batteries. Well, all you have to do is put 6 2-volt batteries together with jumper cables, and that gives you a 12-volt battery. And then they could have kept that powered up by idling a car in the parking lot. And the alternator of the car could have easily kept all those batteries charged up, and as a car ran out of gas, they could have put another car in and hooked the battery chargers to that. They could have kept the pumps going that way, but they didn't do that. They simply said that they only had 2-volt batteries, and therefore they needed a 12-volt battery, and that's why the plant melted down. Well, that's not really true. That's not a good excuse, because a moron, a person who has gone through any kind of electrical engineering class 101 would have known how to take those 2-volt batteries and turn them into a 12-volt battery with a bunch of jumper cables in less than 2 minutes flat. I would have done it myself in less than 2 minutes flat, and I'm not an electrical engineer. So I kind of wonder if maybe, God forbid, this whole thing was a setup of some sort. Either way, it's going to depopulate the Earth to a certain extent. And to the extent that it depopulates the Earth and kills off the ocean is going to be to whatever extent we allow this thing to keep on flooding the poisons into the Pacific Ocean. We must react now. And the fact that nobody's moving at the government level makes me think that they sort of want the poison to come out and for us to die an early death. Maybe as part of a New World agenda to lower the population. I mean, then you also have the conspiracy about the chemtrails. If I were in charge, I would have every airplane, every aircraft checked for equipment that could potentially throw out a chemtrail. And if so, I'd want to know what it's putting out, and if it's toxic. If I were the government, I would have a list and I would know what's toxic. The EPA knows what's toxic. And if they're spraying something other than to make it rain someplace where they have a contract to make it rain, and they're putting out, throwing ice out the back of the plane to cool the atmosphere to make the rain come down to water the cornfield, something like that, that's sort of innocuous, versus saying putting nano-sized particles of aluminum in the air, which are deadly poisonous to humans. And that's what they're finding coming out the back of these airplanes. So I would say these people need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for murdering or attempted murder, or at the very least assaulting our bodies and our minds with chemicals that are poisonous. I mean, what's the difference between that and spraying, say, raid insect killer on a bunch of ants to kill the ants? I mean, they're spraying us from high up in the sky, chemical on us. It's going to kill us. It's kind of like a person going around killing the bugs around their house with a bug killer, or a weed with a weed killer liquid. But instead they're spraying liquid on us from the sky, or powderized aluminum to dumb us down, just like the fluoride in the water. Like I propose, if you think fluoride's so good, I would say it should be in an a la carte fashion. So if you want the fluoride, if you truly believe the fluoride's good for you, like for example, let's say you're a government employee, so you think the fluoride's good for you. Well, I guarantee you, government employees don't think the fluoride's good for them. They're all drinking bottled water. But if you're a moron and you work for the government, or moron and you don't work for the government, in any case, if you think that the fluoride's good for you, you'll be able to go to Walmart and buy a little eyedropper, and then you can put 1 drop of fluoride in a gallon of water, and you can mix it up, and then you can drink your fluoride that way. But the rest of us don't have to drink it if we don't want it. See, that's true freedom of choice versus a commie where you have no freedom of choice. That's what the guy that played Patton, what's his name, George C. Scott, said in that movie about the Dr. Strangelove, when he said, oh, no freedom of choice, well, that's a commie rat. Well, no freedom of choice about putting drinking fluoride that's being put into your water, whether you like it or not. I mean, that's like, definitely no freedom of choice, and we all know that the fluoride's a poison. So we have ample evidence building up now that it looks like the government is doing things to not help us, but to in fact try to kill us. They're putting fluoride in the water to dumb us down and kill us. They're allowing Fukushima to steam, and they're not making an effort to send help over there to help the Japanese people snuff that thing out. And I believe they offered help, but the Japanese are saying, oh, no, I think we can handle this ourselves. Well, that's baloney. They need to send help over there whether the Japanese like it or not, and we're going to help them shut that thing off. And all the countries in the world have to contribute, because this is going to be it's going to be like building a Great Wall of China, but it needs to be built fast. And every day that goes by, hundreds of more sea lions are going to die, and hundreds of more humans are going to be injured or killed. So we need to move very, very quickly. Not to mention that every day that you wait, it's not just the people who are alive now, it's going to be the future generations, because remember I told you these poisons are going to last for 500 million years. So for the rest of the life of the earth, the earth is going to be poisoned. So it's surprising to see that don't you wonder why your government isn't moving quickly to fix this, whether it's in Japan or not? It's funny, because when something goes wrong in Iraq, they run over there. But that's not going to kill us. That's going to maybe just harm our oil flow a little bit. But here we have something that's directly going to kill us, and already is here in measurable amounts. And as a matter of fact, when that polar vortex hit, that came from that storm that went through the Pacific Ocean last fall, it picked up enough radioactivity when it went over Japan from Fukushima, and it went all the way up to the north, and it came back down from the North Pole. And the radioactivity level in the United States spiked enough that it was 2 to 3 times the mandatory evacuation limit. So that's something that they didn't tell you. But we had more than enough radiation limit in the United States to have a mandatory evacuation where you were supposed to be breathing through air tanks. A respirator wouldn't have been good enough. You would have had to have compressed air bottles, and you would have had to be wearing a full rubber suit and walking around like this, like a spacesuit. And then you would have had to be in the process of leaving the area, because you can't stay here. But they let all of us live through that. So all of our lives at this point, no one in the United States is unaffected. Every person in this country is going to live shorter life because of what already happened. So you have to wonder why we don't have an army over there of men building a wall around that thing to wall that sucker off so that no more of these radionuclides can get out. And even if they build the wall far away from this epicenter of the thing and let a part of the Pacific Ocean get polluted there, at least it'll block it and leave it there, and so then they can keep it from circulating in the rest of the ocean and then in the entire biosphere. Plus, you have to remember, when it gets into the ocean, it could evaporate. High winds can blow it, and it could scarf off the surface of the waves. And people who live along the coastline breathe in that salt air. That salt air is just the smell of seawater that's been mystified by high winds out of the ocean as the waves are crashing. And you breathe those things in. You're definitely breathing in cesium-137 and uranium and plutonium. And these atoms, they get inside you. Remember, we're talking about atoms here, so that they'll go right through your skin even. There's really no way of stopping it from getting deep inside your body. So this is very important, folks, that we do something right away about this. So whether you like politics or not, this is not political. We're talking about the poison, being poisoned to death. It's not political. It's not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It's an issue about life or death, and whether or not you want to have poison poured on you. So I don't know about you, but I vote to plug that thing up. And if I were in charge, I'd organize the entire Earth, and we'd plug that thing as fast as humanly possible. I mean, we would do it like yesterday. It has to be done immediately. And if the Japanese say, no, 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 stay away, don't help us, I would force help on them whether they liked it or not. I would say, this is affecting us, and we're coming over here to help you. And if you don't like it, then we're going to end up at war over this, because you're poisoning our entire Earth, and especially the United States. And it's going over the United States and blowing into Europe. And you want to know where the most of it fell from the initial blast? Believe it or not, you would think it would have landed in California because it's in the Pacific Ocean. But the worst hit in the United States occurred in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and Melbourne. And we didn't find that out until just about 6 months ago. I read a newspaper article, which wasn't written until then, where the data was finally released, that the east coast of Florida, in central Florida, got hit harder than any other area of the United States. So it depends on where the plume comes down, because it's high up in the sky, it can float around the world, and then wherever it rains or wherever it just hits air eddy currents just the right way, and that these atoms get caught in a downdraft and come down and get caught in a rainstorm, and then they come down, and that's wherever it drops is where it drops. And it might go around the world before it drops. It might go around the world for a long time. There are atoms in the upper atmosphere right now that are still there from the bomb testing from back in the 40s and the 50s. They're still up there. I think they said 80% of the explosions still have atoms up in the sky, high up in the sky. If you fly in an airplane and you have a Geiger counter, a Geiger counter goes crazy in the airplane as soon as you go up in the air. So no wonder these pilots are getting sick, and these stewardesses are getting sick, and the air crews are getting sick. They're all going to live a shortened life now because of this. And nobody's telling them why. Well, I'm telling you why. So it's just a terrible situation, folks, and it shouldn't have taken this long for someone like me to tell you, but the information has been widely available on the internet. I'm surprised it's not being blasted out of Fox News and CNN every day, because this is more important than these little wars that you have going on all over the place. Because these little wars you have going on all over the place, for the most part, are voluntary soldiers involved in fighting. You've got people, the terrorists or so-called bad people that are causing trouble or making their government go unstable. and then other countries come in because they fear the government there is going to go unstable and then maybe attack them. So not all the time, but in many, many wars, you have the people or participants are voluntary, and they might not like it, but you know, it's voluntary. They could leave the area in some cases. In most cases, the civilians can leave. But with these radionuclides coming and going around the earth, it doesn't matter where you go. These poisons are going to track you down, and you're going to you will live a shorter life because of it. So you will eventually die of kidney failure, liver failure, or hard cancer. It's going to hit you later in life. You'll develop leukemia, brain disease, Alzheimer's. You're going to get cataracts. So that's what you have in store for you, folks. And it's not good. And you need leaders that recognize the earth now. Now, you'll have people like Al Gore saying, oh, the earth is heating up, the earth is heating up. Well, yeah, these chemicals are generating heat. There's no doubt that it isn't heating the ocean. It is heating the ocean. That's how powerful. I mean, you're talking about having a whole nuclear reactor in the ocean, and instead of heating people's homes or making electricity, it's putting its energy into heating the ocean. And that in turn heats the atmosphere. So we need to shut this thing down, because that will also help in keeping the earth from overheating. Okay, folks, we'll talk about something more pleasant next time. So you all be safe now. And remember, do not vote for anyone who's in power. When 2016 comes around, do not vote for the guy who's already in there, whether he's a congressman or a senator or a president, or his brother, friend, sister, or anything. We need all new people. Anybody that's name you recognize, you know now, who's in power now, do not let them get into office. We need new people. And by the way, send some donations to me, folks, because we're working on our website right now. We need all the help we can get. And give me a call. I love talking to you. And you can use PayPal. Just get on to PayPal and send whatever you can to benjamincola@aol.com to help us finish building the website. I've got some really cool videos that I'm going to post on there for you in addition to these shows. And you guys stay safe.